If you're an athlete, you know the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
I think it often comes across that the US players are potentially more cutthroat, or more calculated in kind of the decisions we make.
Howdy, friends. In today's episode, we talk to two successful henchmen out of the UK, and we learn what they do to grow their community, to foster it, and how to get a ton of people to show up at their events. All of you henchmen out there should find it interesting, but anybody who cares about their Malifaux community, I think, is going to learn some neat things. They talk about some neat raffle ideas they do for their events, how they demo to hook in new players, and we also have a real interesting discussion at the end about perceptions on the American approach to the game versus the UK approach to the game. We try to answer the question on whether the American players are different than the players in the UK. Enjoy.
Playing a tabletop strategy game allows you to unplug and test your skills against friends. Every week, Third Floor Wars delivers useful strategies, discussions, battle reports, and reviews to tabletop games like Malifaux. If you want to get better at the games you already play, or discover the games other people are playing, you are in the right place. Craig and Ray welcome you to the Third Floor and the Tabletop Talk broadcast.
Craig here on the Third Floor. Today we have two well-known henchmen from the UK on the show, Carl Lee and David Brown. Now, Carl's a henchman running a meta in Warrington and Stockport, and you've seen his name at the top third of many event results. He's a very good painter, and he's done a lot for growing the Malifaux community over there in the UK. So, Carl, welcome to the Third Floor.
Hi, Craig. How you doing?
Good, my friend. So the first thing I always like to find out from guests is kind of what got you into tabletop gaming and how you found Malifaux.
So to be honest, with tabletop gaming, it was probably like 20 years ago. Typically my older brother and our cousins got into, as pretty much everyone did at some point, Warhammer Fantasy. So, being my younger brother, I kind of got a little bit jealous and wanted to get involved. So that kind of kicked it off, but it was probably post uni, and towards the end of Fantasy when, again, my brother, got me a Lilith box set, and
nice.
I can't stand Neverborn. So, it put me off the game a little bit. And then one time I was just at Element and I saw the Latigos, the Ortega family box set.
Oh, yeah.
I bought that, kind of never looked back. A Black Friday came a few weeks later and as, 300 pounds lighter. So, and it just went from there, really.
Yeah, Perdita was was the crew box that got me into the game too, and I was a guild player for first couple of years that I was playing. So you mentioned that you hate Neverborn. Is it the aesthetic, or why do you hate Neverborn?
I think it's a little bit, like you said, the aesthetic, the way we look. Aside from Kalodi, who was probably the least Neverborn looking one, none of them really appealed to me. But then also, like my brother played Neverborn and particularly Lilith for the majority of M2E. So I just we kind of didn't want to play the same thing, but he had some guild and then never really played them because I was always playing guild as well. So we kind of blocked each other out of the faction a little bit.
So you're a henchman, Carl. At what point did you kind of that decision get made where you said, you know what, I'm going to be more than just a player. I'm going to apply and become a henchman. Was there something that kind of pushed you that direction?
Yeah. So what it was, I actually moved back home, or to the town I grew up in, should I say. And there's always kind of a tabletop presence, but there's kind of a minimal Malifaux presence. People knew of it. People had played first edition. A lot of people had crews, but as in most kind of areas, it was just very Games Workshop dominated. So I kind of thought I've got some free time. I want to continue getting, regular games in. So, I put the application in, and then, just it kind of went from there, really. Where I actually, like I said, my hometown was quite a tough nut to crack. It kind of kicked off properly when I actually moved because I got a new job. So I moved to just outside of Warrington, and there's a hobby store opening up who had reached out to Weird specifically because they wanted to stock Malifaux, and they wanted to, have active players. So, the Henchmen wrangler at the time, got in touch with me and kind of, put us, in contact with each other. And after that, we had demo days, leagues, couple of tournaments, and, it all kind of kicked off from there.
Very cool. Very cool. Our other guest is David. So, David, you're a henchman. You're running out of the Milton Keynes area, but you do events in a variety of venues. And probably what most of our listeners will know your name from is you run the UK national event. And someday I'm going to get over there for that, because that's been just one of my dreams, because I could always consider that one of probably the coolest events. And from what I'm hearing, you're hoping that it's going to be bigger this year than it's ever been before, which makes me happy considering the edition change. So, David, welcome to the third floor.
Hello, welcome. I'm pleased to be on the podcast for the change, and it'll be next year that will be the biggest one.
Gotcha.
This year I'll just check the numbers. We're 83 players.
That's still pretty big, man.
Which is not bad.
Big. What's the largest so far?
The record is 100. Is 120.
Wow.
Which was wasn't me as the organizer, but I was helping with that.
Because that changed hands, right?
It's been various people, because originally it was the UK GT,
right?
And that was run by Joe, and then I ran it actually the first year of M2E. So we had something like 35 players first year of M2E, because that was obviously a difficult another change over time. And then right. Mike Marshall took it over and brought it up to the 120 mark. And then it's dropped off. Last year we had, I think, 88 players on the day. There were quite a lot of dropouts because partly because of M3E being announced, I think, and a lot of people went, wait around for that.
Yeah.
So I've actually probably sold 15 tickets in the last week and a half. So
that's incredible.
I'm trying to get the numbers tied down, because I've got to book. I have to hire the tables and so book the swag and stuff. So I'm trying to get the numbers tied down in the next week or so.
So how do you, David? How do you come up with all that terrain? I mean, right now you're talking what, 45 tables of terrain?
Yeah, it's in my garage. I'm not kidding.
You're telling me you have 40 tables worth of terrain in your garage?
Yes.
Wow,
it's crazy. And I keep saying, about the last couple of years, I've said no more terrain. And I went to a show today down in London and came back with some crates and some barrels and a wagon. They were a good price, and I need a bit more scale. You never have too much scatter. So
yeah.
So I keep doing that.
You've just accumulated it over time, David?
Yeah. So it's quite interesting, because I've been playing Malifaux since it came out, and I was at the show. I know Graham from Simple Miniature Games, who's one of the distributors, and I've been working with him for 13, 14 years doing demos. We started off doing Confrontation, and then 8043, which was a Rackham like sci-fi unit game, and I was demoing that at a show, and Malifaux was at the show, first show, and so I picked up the rule book the night. It was a 2-day show, and sort of started reading the rule book and just reading the fluff and just thinking, this sounds brilliant. Had a quick demo the following day, which wasn't very good. The people running the demo just trying to do 4-player on a 4x4 board. And it just didn't. Yeah, you can imagine it didn't work. But I did go home with 3 crew boxes, a rule book, Fate deck, it's gone downhill from there, really.
So, David, you started with first edition. So obviously you've gone through 1, 1.5, 2, and now into 3. I know there's a lot of people that listen that never played anything. I mean, I never played 1 or 1.5. And a lot of listeners only play 2, and we do have listeners now that have only played 3. Can you give kind of the short description of each of those editions so people can kind of get an idea of the difference between them?
Oh dear! So the biggest change, if there's one change I wanted to highlight, it'd be the Red Joker. So in first edition, Red Joker damage was flip another card and add that damage.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do severe.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then second edition we went to severe plus weak, and now we're down to severe plus 1.
Yeah,
so we've taken the edge. The other thing in first edition, you could use a Soul Stone to flip an additional card, so you could get some ridiculously high scores, and that was very depressing because you'd see somebody over the side table with a 31, and you'd go, "Well, I can't get close to that," especially the way I flip cards, and so it was the basic system was there. Using cards, I found really good, and a really interesting mechanic, and it's probably the one thing that separates fundamentally the game from almost any other game, even some that use cards, and I think that appeals to a lot of people. And the other area that I think makes Malifaux unique is the aesthetic.
Yeah,
it looks great. If you've got a good board and some beautiful models, you can get people, you draw people in. I've run demos at a lot of shows over the last 10 years, and what has drawn a lot of people in is the terrain. So we were talking before about how I started doing terrain, and I bought some of the first MDF terrain coming out, which was all Wild West themed, and getting as many queries about the terrain as about the game actually. And people go, where did you get that? And
it's hard when you've got a Malifaux board built with good painted terrain and 2 good, well-painted models or crews on the board. There's few things prettier.
Totally agree with that. And as I say, I run a lot of shows. I'm not less so now, but still do. I still do some of the bigger shows like Salute, which is a big one-day show in London, which I've been going to for more years than I care to remember, to be honest. Running demos of various things in Malifaux for the last, I think, 8 of the last 10 years I've run Malifaux demos. And one of the years that I didn't do it, I was doing Puppet Wars.
Wow. So you've been a weird guy.
Yeah. Some
cool.
People would say that. Yeah, definitely.
That's spelled both ways, right?
Absolutely.
That's funny. Carl, how about you? I mean, did you start way back in 1, or were you just pretty much just 2?
I was pretty much just 2. Pretty much came in the 3rd book. So Shifting Loyalties, I think it was.
Yep.
We dabbled a little bit kind of in the book before, so the Crossroads book, I think it was. And then, we really kind of probably picked up the competitive side of it, book 4, book 5. So probably, I think we got a good year of really taking it seriously. But I was just going to say, to echo what Dave said, for me, kind of, I don't feel like I can go to another game now because of the card mechanic works so well. And it just offers a level of control that other games don't have. And I think that's why it's so suitable for being a competitive game. Just the measure of control and how much influence you can actually put into the game. So that's probably one of the reasons that kind of drove me to actually take it upon myself to improve as a player and to play more competitively. Because in Warhammer and things like that, I did. I went to events, but I never had the drive to want to run my own events, or even the drive to go to, more than a couple of events a year. Where in Malifaux, I can probably say I'll run 4 events and attend 10 at least. So.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with either, both of you more. I mean, I never was a competitive gamer, even though I've been, playing tabletop games for 20, 25 years now. Malifaux was the first time I ever said, I want to compete playing this. And it has to do with the fact that I think player agency is so much more prominent in this game versus other games. And it's because of that, the random number generator and the control hand that the cards create for you are just superior to dice. And as was mentioned, it's really hard to go back to dice after you get used to the card mechanic. And I thought it was interesting, David, when you're talking about kind of the Red Joker's evolution over the editions, because everything you just talked about is, minimizing the amount of spiking that we see, that Red Joker does, which again kind of brings everything towards the center of the bell curve a little bit more. And when your random number generators are fitting a tall bell curve, that means that what the decisions the players are making have even more impact. So it sounds like my love of the game and the reason that it's my favorite tabletop game is quite similar to yours for the same reasons. So guys, one of the things I want to try to do today is I want to learn really about your individual communities a little bit. I want to talk about the events you run and how you run them. And what I'm hoping is for the listeners out there that, one, for those of you that are listening that are henchmen or are thinking to become henchmen, these are 2 gentlemen that have, been doing it for a while and they've been very successful at it. So hopefully we'll be able to give you guys some insights and some tricks and tips on, how to foster, grow, and create, a good community and then, run good events. But for those listeners out there that aren't henchmen, I think it's good for us to get the perspective from the henchman side. For so many of us, without these henchmen out there doing work for free, it takes a tremendous amount of work. I think that we all appreciate what they do. And really, I think, hearing from them a little bit more and getting some insights on, how they do it, why they do it, and what we as players maybe can do to help them out even more should be helpful. And the other thing I'm really curious about, and we'll do before the end of the show, is kind of talk about the differences between the UK and the US. Here on the show, I've had, several guests from the UK on, and have developed some friendships as a result of it. And I'm really starting to get a sense that there's kind of a belief that there's a difference between kind of how the 2 countries approach the game. So I think we'll talk through that. So first off, David, can we talk a little bit about kind of your meta? So the group of people that you're fostering and herding there. Can you give us an idea kind of how many regular players are kind of in your group?
So at my local store, there's very few regular players at the moment. There's probably only 2 or 3 of us regularly playing. And that's because of family commitments, work commitments. That's taken at least 3 or 4 of my local players to a position where they can't really play. I mean, I played Owen this week and I haven't seen him for like 2 months because he's got family commitments. So within the very immediate community, that's the case. But then I see people on a broader basis because I will travel. And also there's a lot more people now, running their own communities and growing their own communities. Whereas when I first, as a henchman, it was I was pushing communities in over a much wider area and traveling further to get people started by either going to clubs or running demos or doing shows. And so there's less need to do that because there's more people playing. It's got more of a more momentum. Mm-hmm. So I don't get so many different people to play locally. But I like on Friday I travelled. I know it doesn't sound very far by American standards, but I like about 40 minutes drive and played. A friend of mine, Graham, who I've not probably seen for 2 years, who played, and we had a game. And I'm so I'm having to travel a bit further to get a bit more variety of games. But we play quite a lot of tournaments, and for me, that's just extra games. So I'm not going to tournaments to win, but
Right.
just to play different people and have an enjoyable day or an enjoyable weekend playing some different games of Malifaux.
Yeah, and that is something I do love about tournaments. Is again, as most people who listen know, I'm not good at this game. So obviously I'm not playing in tournaments to win because I don't do that. But my favorite thing is just, at Nova, I got 5 games over a 2-day period. And you talk about the tournament before, I ended up playing like 10 games total over the weekend. And that's just fun. That's just fun, especially if you love the game. Carl, how about your community? How big is your groups?
So my community is quite individual, I'd like to say, because again, being in the UK, we have a much kind of smaller area to cover, but in the area I was, there's quite a lot of fragmented individual communities. So probably the toughest thing for me was trying to get everyone in that area playing together.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, the store that I was actually running my first set of events out of closed down. Because, it's quite a tough environment, and hobby stores, need to be run, I think, pretty well to survive, to be honest.
Yeah.
But then what that kind of did was it started to show people in the local, like the northwest of England, that there are going to be events and there are people trying to make these more regular. So kind of in my... I'd like to call them meta or our group. We'll have like a few from Chester, which is obviously like Alex Drake, who his partner Emma, and then some of their friends, and then I have a local who a Polish chap called Radek, and he's quite proficient as well. We pick up players from all over the Northwest. And what's quite nice actually is a player I gave a demo to probably just over 2 years ago has started building his own community.
Oh, that's so cool.
In the area where I tried and didn't really get much.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that was because M2E was quite difficult to get into, or M3 just got people buzzing. But he's doing great. And I think the first week he had 18 players, show up for like a league night and some pickup games, and then it's rotated between 10 and 18 players like pretty frequently. So again, I'm similar to Dave, where I don't have a host of players who will show up on Tuesday and there's going to be 10 of us,
right?
Getting in 2 games and having a good old chat. But because we all are probably within an hour and a half of each other in the in that area, we come together for events, we travel for events. And I think as a henchman, for me, it was more so getting each element of the different locations showing up and supporting events, and just from there building quite a lot. Because a lot of the local events that I first ran usually sold out, so it was between like 14 and 18 players.
Nice.
And the majority of them were local, give or take. A few who would support from a bit further afield. Just those becoming regular occurrences really got people just playing regularly, and like I said, traveling to more events and clawing my way up the rankings and kind of showing our area for quite a strong little meta, to be honest.
Sure. Now you mentioned, Carl, the shop closing, and I'm curious because here in the U.S., the best thing that ever happened to tabletop gaming is Magic the Gathering, because that's what keeps the stores open. That's the reason we have tables. That's the reason we have stores that carry tabletop gaming, because nobody is keeping their doors open because of tabletop gaming. Is Magic as big over there as it is here? Is it the same thing where the stores are kept open because of Magic?
Certainly where I'm at the store I play, it's covers everything. I mean, but Magic is obviously a big income generator for them. They've got a massive stock of board games. Probably board games is probably 50% of their stock. And then he's the guy who runs it's got 2 stores, and he's had a board game cafe as well, which didn't quite work out, but he's now moved that into next door to where the gaming store is on a smaller scale. So anything to try and generate money, but Magic is still pretty big.
Yeah, and I think that works. Applies as well to my area. So the store that I henched out of, and it quite possibly is the reason why it didn't last. The owner just wasn't a fan of card games, and he only really picked card games up when probably the store was already kind of on its arse, if I'm being honest.
Right.
So not embracing one side of it made the other side suffer. So not embracing the card side of it meant that, in time there was, the knock-on effect onto the tabletop side, which was just, the store couldn't continue to run. Amongst other things.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, one of the things that I try to get players here to always, do as often as they can is, the price, like Miniature Market will run a sale and, you'll see 30% off, 40% off boxes. And it's so tempting. But, if you can just eat the couple bucks and order it through your local store, it makes a big difference as far as keeping the game alive and the store going and the store supporting the game. We're never going to compete generating the revenue that Magic the Gathering does because it's a different model. Once you buy a crew box and get it painted up, you're not going to buy that crew box again. And that's going to, get you through. For me, the 2 factions that I play, I've pretty much bought all the models. So it's just going to be new stuff that comes out or Nightmare stuff that comes out for me that, will drive that. Whereas Magic the Gathering, it's as bad as GW players are, Magic the Gathering players are it's ridiculous. But that's good for the stores, that money is getting spent. So guys, let's take a quick break. And when we get back from this break, I want to talk a little bit more about how each of you handled, what I call the desert, which was the time between when, 3rd edition leaked and when the open beta started, and talk a little bit more about, what you guys see as, effective ways to kind of foster and grow a community. So we'll be right back. It's really fascinating to hear, how each of your communities are pretty unique and just how different things are from your side to our side. We're really spoiled here in the Carolinas on the East Coast of the U.S. because we have 3 really successful game stores all within 15, 20 minutes of each other. And each one has their own Malifaux night, let alone nights for other games. You guys are talking about, traveling 40 miles to play a game. And that's something that all of us will do, in a blink of an eye here. And of course, that's just the differences from a geographical sense. But one thing that happened here that I think really happened on a global sense is, I prematurely, the existence of a 3rd edition of this game kind of leaked out. I get the feeling that when it happened, Weird scrambled to the announcement much sooner than they wanted to. And it rolled out in a way that I don't think they had planned for. And the game suffered. Now, luckily for us here in the Carolinas, as soon as the closed beta got into place and it kind of more beta players locally were starting to play. And then when the open beta came in, we had a huge surge. But I'd be curious to know, David, how much of an impact was that, those almost a year's time between the leaked announcement and the open beta? Did that have a huge impact on the level of activity in your area?
Yeah, certainly. Though I didn't see too much locally. The impact on, for example, on the UK Nationals was we went from 120 tickets sold to 88 players in attendance. And although some of that was, just the natural dropout and, life happening to people, there was certainly a fair number of that was people who decided, well, okay, the edition's going to change. I'm not going to invest any more time in second edition. I'll wait till third, or I'll go and play something else. And some of those players are certainly coming back. Certainly good to see recently at events players coming back to the game who've been away and played Guild Ball or AOS or whatever, and are coming back finding third edition, finding it's a great game, and enjoying themselves at events.
And has that pretty much, I mean, for those, because that's an interesting perspective, David, has it been pretty much positive for those returning players when they look and play third edition?
I've heard very little negative.
Yeah.
Very little negative. Those who are coming back are finding that there are enough differences. I mean, the way the strats and schemes work is quite different. And although most of the crews run in a similar way, a lot of people like the keyword and the thematic element, and especially those who like me, played in that way in the previous editions. It ties that in, and that does seem to be quite popular. And I think even though the very competitive players, and we do have some very competitive players in the UK, are finding the challenge really, really satisfying. So I think even though that before they, where you could pick anything, more or less, I think they're finding that the challenge of, right, how can I make the best use within this restriction? And that's I'm getting positive feedback from those when I talk to sort of the Flipping Weirds, for example.
Yeah, I'm getting similar stuff when I talk to people that are returning back to the game, and there's still friends out there that were very regular 2E players that I haven't completely roped back in again, and it's a little frustrating because I do think that if they approached it and saw it, or if these players had never played 2 and came to 3, that they would just lose their mind and love it. But I have some friends that are kind of angry at Weird, angry about kind of the leak, and I don't know why they're necessarily angry at Weird for that, but and then the desert that happened afterwards, and they that was built on some frustrations that they've had about the supply during 2E, the releases, and sometimes it was tough to get some things, and things were coming out late, and that coupled with, I think we're seeing a little bit of that here, of course, at the new edition change, though from my understanding it's not nearly as bad as it was from 1 to 2. But yeah, I'm with you. It's a better game. How about you, Carl? Did it have a huge impact on the activity in your area?
Funnily enough, it actually, excuse me, it actually didn't really affect us that much. But mostly because we was quite a new meta, and we was all kind of quite new into playing events, as a group. A lot of us had kind of really got keen. We had really taken up that mantle to improve as players and to, kind of give being competitive a go. So, we actually kind of all had the mentality that, well, we knew an edition was going to come anyway at some point. We didn't know, obviously it wasn't released and it wasn't leaked and there wasn't, it wasn't knowledge, but logically we all knew that it was getting to a point where it needed, an edition revision. So we kind of carried on, business as normal, if anything, and, kind of to close off M2E, I actually ran like a goodbye M2E tournament. And everyone had a good time, and Weird gave us, like a load of nice prizes. And, it was kind of, we put a benchmark then and, said, this is kind of like the last event I'll run for M2E, and we'll see kind of what comes with the beta, because a couple of them were there, a couple of us were in that and playing, but also we had obviously Alex was it was his first time in the UK Masters as well, so we all kind of kept playing because we wanted him to do the best he could. So we were playing games with him, so he could get games in against stuff he hadn't played. And, a couple of the others were close to Masters and were trying to push for it. But then as well, we traveled down and went to the Masters side event. So, we all kind of had to keep, an eye in M2E as well as keeping an eye on M3E to give constructive criticism and feedback for the beta. So, it really didn't hit us. And I think predominantly it was because we did have quite a few new players kind of youthful players in their kind of Malifaux career. But I mean, in terms of M3E, it's other people who enjoyed M2E in our group have stuck by it and like it more because it's cleaner, and like Dave said, it's got the keyword and it just makes sense. It's a lot more logical, and you're not seeing as many kind of all-star crews. But and then also we're getting those again, people who haven't played Malifaux for a long time coming back to it, and it's quite funny. Like I see some people who, when Malifaux was at its worst, or Weird were at their worst, so to speak, they moved to Guild Ball and really scratched the competitive itch with Guild Ball. But now those people are moving back to Malifaux because for quite a few of them, kind of Guild Ball has gone a little stale, or there's something that isn't fulfilling what they want anymore, and they're finding that coming back to M3E is scratching that itch and getting what kind of they want. Obviously, it's not perfect, and I don't think any game ever will be, but I prefer it from second edition, and a lot of the changes I feel make it just a lot more accessible for players.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, Carl, is that the game is much easier to put in front of somebody new than it was. I think at any point in 2, but especially towards the end of 2. And you mentioned Guild Ball. It's funny how that Guild Ball was kind of the gateway drug to competitive play for some of your players. Guild Ball is my second favorite tabletop game. Guild Ball is a really, really good game. The rules are tighter than they are in Malifaux. And it's good. The problem I have, or the reason that I think Malifaux is better for me is, Guild Ball I kind of consider as a solvable game, partially because of how tight it is. Mm-hmm. You can really, you can actually identify the best play. You can find the best sequence. And whereas in Malifaux, there's so many factors involved. There's such a huge variety of abilities and approaches to scoring in Malifaux. And, again, we talked about the player agency. Malifaux is a deeper game than Guild Ball. But Guild Ball is a good game, but I could see, you talk about those players that went out, they played Guild Ball, and it kind of ran its course and they came back to Malifaux. I completely get that because that's kind of what, I felt, with that as well. But it sounds like the reception of 3 has been good, which I like. So one thing, Carl, have you, for other henchmen that are out there right now listening, is there anything that you think that you do that has really helped kind of keep your community going and help fostering it, or are there things that you have discovered that allow you to be successful as a henchman? Probably the main thing for me is, whenever I'm approaching an event, or I'm kind of looking what when I started henching, and the first couple of events, I was like, what do I want? Why are people going to stay and come to this event and support me? They've got no reason to. And the thing that hit me is I wanted to make an event that I would go to and I'd go to frequently. I'd have loyalty to the event. And when I was playing Warhammer Fantasy, there's one particular event that they always did a great job. And it was a series of events called A Gathering of Might. And the guy who ran it, it was an absolute joyful event. It was
there's so many things that was done correctly and just made you want to go back. So, yeah, when I was playing Fantasy, that was one of the few events that I went to quite a lot, and generally had a good experience. And I think I applied that sort of ideology to my events. And it was just, yeah, I want to make an event that somewhat that I would go to, and that, yeah, it ticks the boxes for me. So a big bit was making sure that, you know, for the people who win, you know, there's good quality trophies, because, you know, you want to show off that you've done well. And not everyone, you know, obviously some people are a little more subdued about it, but it's nice to have something that's quite commemorative of doing well. But then also I wanted to, you know, make sure that people who had really nice painted crews would win, you know, a nice best painted trophy. And I wanted to make sure that there's always kind of unique and good prizes available, and just other things, you know. And I'd make sure to take the time to make the encounters seem kind of logical and make it quite difficult. And I think one of the episodes you did where you were talking to Owen, and, you know, I think a lot of people seem to really enjoy the curated encounters he did for Nova. And that's something that, you know, where possible, I try and do. So then I wouldn't want it where, you know, one thing is so obvious that people won't want to take it because it just sticks out like a sore thumb. You know, it's just an easy telegraph because of what else is in the pool. So yeah, that was my kind of main approach, is just hitting the different areas that will appeal to the different type of player, to make sure that you know, each event just leaves a good impression on the person who's come, because, you know, they're spending their money, they're taking their time out of a day to come, and we don't have to. And so yeah, for me, that's just kind of, I want them to know that I appreciate them attending.
You know, it's funny, Carl. I think, you know, you're talking about the trophies. I mean, if you look at, you know, plaques and trophies and things like that, they're not that expensive. But boy, they are cool. Like I'm sitting here on the third floor right now and looking across to the other side of the room, and I still have a best painted trophy that I got at an event run by Travis Wayforth, and like I have that on my shelf, and it didn't cost much money to get made, but it means a lot to me, and I have it there. But the one thing I really wanted to kind of dig a little bit further into, Carl, is you mentioned that fantasy event that really you became a loyal attendee of. Was there anything specific that fostered that feeling beyond what you've already talked about?
But numerous things, really. I think as well, the main thing was the guy who hosted it, the guy who ran the tournament, and the couple of people who he you know, who helped him just had the right attitude. You know, they were likable people. I could identify with them on a playing level. So if anything, it probably, the people who you don't want going to your event, the people that, you know, like bad gamers, so to speak, got weeded out. And, you know, kind of, like, no one wants to go to an event, you know, again, in your free time and have to put up with someone who's just being a proper annoying arse. And I think that they did a great job of getting a like-minded bunch of players together. And yeah, that was a really overriding factor. Other things were, you know, they'd just have kind of things in between rounds or during the rounds, and things that aren't necessarily as easy to do in Malifaux, because you don't want to force people to play a certain way. But it was something that was applicable in Warhammer Fantasy. But yeah, again, they just had a high level of quality in terms of trophies. You know, they would give you like tournament branded dice, but it was the full set of dice, so not so you'd use them all weekend. And, you know, each year you went, you would know you've been that year because there's a specific color. Just little things like that, and they're the ones that all make the event seem that bit nicer, you know, a bit more professional, and but also a personal touch as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. And the hardest part to get right, or the easiest part to get right, depending on who you are. But I think the host sets the tone, right? And then the community over time decides, what this event's going to look like. How about you, David? What are some things that you've done both, as a community and as an event? Somebody who runs events. What are some tricks and tips or some perspectives we can give other henchmen across the world?
I think Carl's reminded me of a good one, which is the swag, so called. So if you go to an event, you get a little something, and it can be something that's almost insignificant. So I run an Easter themed event called Hall of Eggs, which started off because we had some egg haulers, which was a limited edition model, revenue model, and I did a token, so a 30mm marker. And we've done that every year. So I think we were around number 6 or number 7 this year. And we've done a different colour every year. And I've had people go, "Oh, I really missed your event last year. I haven't got the green one or whatever." And you build that loyalty for events. So I've got a number of events that I get so much hassle if I don't run them.
Yeah.
And people are so disappointed they can't. So you're building that loyalty. And as Carl said, you build it up because you run a good quality event, and almost it's you don't notice the TO,
right? Yeah, the community
in a way that's itself. A good. The event seems to run itself,
right?
And I think that's the key, because without the TO there, it wouldn't happen. it would be a shite event, because the TO does stuff that people don't notice,
right?
And a good smooth running event. And if I think back to, I've been running tournaments in 2010, 2011, and I've tried, various formats, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, fixed master, fixed pool, fixed faction, everything. And you do different events and you find out what works, and you talk to the community. When we first started, there was a prize for first place, second place, third place. And people coming back saying, I win. You get some players will win every event, or win, podium every event. And I said, I've already got these things. I mean, that's where we moved to raffles. Right. So now you turn up to a Malifaux event, and with 1 or 2 exceptions. So Hall of Eggs, the first place always gets an Easter themed Malifaux prize, and always will. I've got stock for next year already. But generally, your first prize, you get a shiny trophy, or something, a certificate, depending on the organizer and the size of the event, and how they want to spend their money.
Yep.
And the importance of the event. So the GTs tend to have a nice prize. I'm looking at some really unique trophies for the UK Nationals. Secret. Trophies. and last year we'd provided a wrestling belt for the Nationals. Yeah, and hopefully they're doing the same this year, which is a hell of a good prize. But we work to this place where there's basically a pool of prizes which anybody who turns up for the event can win, and the different TOs run that in different ways. So my normal events is you get a ticket for turning up, and that's a raffle ticket. The GT last weekend that Tom ran, you've had a painted crew, you got a ticket per round.
Yep.
If you got a best player or a most sporting player, and there was a couple of them on the bottom of your score sheet that you could hand out, you got an extra couple of raffle tickets. And he ran what we call a skewed raffle. So there's a pot for each prize, and you put half of your raffle ticket in that pot. If you like, I really wanted the crew box, not a crew box, a KR case, small KR case. So I put all my raffle tickets in one pot. And so it was that pot, it was that prize or nothing. Other right. people, spread across a number of maybe less popular prizes. I went away with 2 or 3 things. So that seems to work really well, because it means you can turn up for your first event, have a good time, maybe not even win a game, and walk away with something. We all have. I'm not sure it's a thing. It's certainly a thing in the UK. The wooden spoon. Or the,
yeah.
What's yours, Carl? What's your? Yeah, Carl ought to explain his last place prize, I think.
Yeah. So obviously, traditionally, it's a wooden spoon. And I think for my first event, I had a wooden spoon, but then I found a lovely golden turd that was on a pedestal, and usually it'd get some witty remark on the on the little plaque that comes with it about being a bad player. So yeah, that became a bit of an on-running theme for my events. That the worst player did get a nice shiny turd, but and actually,
and I don't think it's I don't think it's the worst player. It's the player who came to the bottom, and I think part of that is there's a lot of players who celebrate that last place.
Yeah,
my friend, one of my local players, Andy, nicest guy, terrible Malifaux player by his own admission, and he was so pleased to go away from the Nationals 2 years ago with a massive wooden spoon.
That's so funny.
And I was so pleased. And so my spoons, when I do a wooden spoon, they're all hand painted. They have the Malifaux logo or M3 logo on, and the date and where it details about the event. And I hand paint mine. That's my, if you like, my thematic thing. I always give a spoon, but it's always a celebration.
Right.
You came to this event, and you've got away with something.
Yeah, it's funny, David. You were describing kind of that raffle format, and it's exactly what we're doing here in the Carolinas, which I think is really interesting. And I just want to kind of recap it for those listening to make sure they understand it, because I think this is a really cool thing to do, and it's for all the reasons that David talked about. Because let's be honest, you're going to typically see, especially with Malifaux, the same gang of 5 or 6 people are going to make podium, right? From event to event to event, especially local events. You have your top tier players that are going to routinely do well. And over time, how many Nightmare Root Beer golems are they going to want if you keep giving them prizes, right? But to take care of them, what David and Carl, I think, are talked about already is, little trophies, the chips and the 30 millimeter markers that David talked about, I think are good. You already know that everybody playing Malifaux is an obsessive collector because they're playing tabletop games, and that's what we are. So giving them another thing to collect, I think, is really good. But the raffle ticket format, so and David, it's almost identical. It was when you're relating it. It was very familiar to me. So you come up with reasons to give out tickets. So the reasons that we do are similar to David, which is you get a ticket for showing up. You get a ticket for each round that you have a fully painted crew. You get tickets for good sportsmanship. If the TO is walking around and just sees a really good interaction or just 2 people being good guys and gals when they're playing each other, maybe a rules dispute that they kind of figure out on their own, like 2 civilized people, he'll throw them a ticket. And then we do exactly what you talked about, David, is you have a buffet of prizes, a crew box here, widgets there, so on and so forth. And you decide where you're going to put your tickets. Do I want 3 tickets on this and 10 tickets on that? Do I want all 20 towards this prize? And then you do a raffle ticket for each of those individual things. And you've kind of had your own control hand to decide where your odds are. So if for those of you that are henches out there, TOs out there, try that out. It's something that's been very successful. And it's interesting to hear that it's been very good for David as well.
Well, and I can't even claim credit for it. I pitched the idea off somebody else. So as with all the best ideas.
Yeah, I don't know where we picked it up at the Carolinas, to be honest with you. It just kind of always was there. One of the kind of the original henchmen that Dawn McCormick, who isn't really active now anymore, she was the first time I'd ever seen anybody do that. And I think we just all kind of adopted it and loved it. We have a guy that engraves wooden spoons for every event. He's got a wood laser thing, and he puts the event name on it and stuff like that. It's little stuff like that does have an impact. And
I find it really nice when I play people and they get their stuff out of the bag, and there's one of my markers in their bag, and because they're still proud to be using, a Hall of Eggs marker or a Lost Love marker or a widget, measuring widgets. We've done those before. Makes life difficult when you're thinking of something different as well.
Yeah. And I'll tell you another thing that's really minor, but I think it does matter. And we're starting to see that a little bit more here on stateside, is kind of naming your tournaments. And you guys do that all the time with Hall of Eggs 1, 2, 3, and 4. What is it? North of the Breach or Breach of the North. I think that's clever because it says, that at this time of the year, we have this event. And it has a name, and this is the 5th one. And I really think stuff like that, as small as it is, and you couple that with something commemorative, and you don't have to spend a bunch of money to make it. I think those are things that TOs out there should think about if they're not already doing. As far as taking care of things between events, Carl, is there anything that you do as a henchman to kind of keep the game going or to promote events, or what do you do between events?
Yeah, so we, as most people probably do in their own meta, everyone has a chat group or a Facebook group, and it's kind of become the norm really in keeping communication up. But one thing that I generally do is kind of post what events are coming up and kind of get what like an idea of who wants to go where, and who's going to be attending which event, and then with that kind of try and get a little crew of us going. And usually it ends up being quite reliant on me because I'm one of the few drivers in my area, so I end up ferrying everyone around. But that's one bit. Or we arrange we're quite impromptu with game days. Like I said, we don't. The individual areas have set days where they'll usually play. But then at the same time, we might just kind of ad hoc. We're going to go to this store today, and X, Y, and Z are going to play. So if anyone wants to jump in, come along, or we're going to go elsewhere, and it's just things like that, really. And then the usual sort of we all chat about it. We're all kind of talking about what sort of tech we're working out and things like that. So to kind of keep us ticking over, it's usually other people's events, and it's just a way where, like I said, 3, 4, 5 of us will all travel down together, make a bit of a day of it, flip some cards, have a laugh. But in terms of my actual events, I'm always kind of thinking, what can I do to make it better than the last one? So what sort of swag can I come up with? We went to the English GT last weekend, and the swag there was great.
I saw pictures.
Yeah, there's a nice book. There's like stickers, scheme marker, just and the book as well. It's brilliant because I use a book when I play all the time for recording down various things, whether it's writing down what I've chosen schemes wise, or tracking people's wounds, because I've got like a funny OCD thing where I don't really like marking my cards. So I don't. So I end up just writing them in a book. And then other little things as well, like things that I think might have gone well, or that to kind of look out for in the past, and having a big tournament kind of branded one is brilliant. So I'm always kind of in between events, always trying to just plot and plan little things. And I've got like a couple of event ideas that I'd kind of like to try at some point, just as a one-off, and quite quirky ones. Again, they'll still be competitive, they'll still be ranked and things like that, but just working out ways where I can make it more of an experience as well as an event. Generally kind of.
I think, and I think, having that group chat's a big deal. I think it's something that's helped foster the community that we have here at the Carolinas. And, I got a kick out of it, Carl, when you were talking earlier. It sounded like, I had this image of this training dojo for Alex, where, you guys are the sparring partners getting the champion ready for the next representation. But the reason I chuckled is because, we have a large group of players. We have, 30 plus some odd players spread out through the Carolinas that are, I think, core players. And but we identify with our store a little bit too. So we have kind of, a little bit of that as well. How about you, David? Are there things that you do between events really to kind of, keep the community alive?
I think there's things that we will run like maybe a Enforcer Brawl or a Henchmen Hardcore evening. Not so much because we're not a very competitive group, although we have got a group name, and on rankings we are the Milton Schemers, and the main reason for that is with the tournament tool that's used in the UK, Bag of Tools, avoids first round matchups if you're in the same team. And so the only reason we formed a team was because I ran a tournament where one of my players only played in 3 rounds. He plays every week. So it was unfortunate. That was just the way it worked, and even as a TO, I couldn't quite fiddle it. To avoid that, but so one of the reasons for doing that. So there are some. They're not so strong now. At one stage, there was a very strong team element within the tournament scene. So we had there was a team called the Black Jokers and another team, the Traptor Massive, who had their own little thing going in terms of that both of those teams had the player who came the lowest placed in the tournament then had a something they had to wear at the next event. So it was for the Tractor boys, it was a tractor on a lanyard, and then for the Black Jokers, it was a thing called Mung or something like that, who was just like a voodoo doll that they had to hang around their neck for the next tournament to show the shame of being, the worst performing player in that team. And
that's funny.
That really did at one stage. That was quite strong with a few of the teams, and now that's dropped off to a certain extent. The Flipping Weirds are obviously well known for being the uber competitive team, and I don't know, is your team? Have you got a group name up in the Northwest, Carl?
So yeah, we do have a group name, and the only thing is it's not been put onto Bag of Tools yet. So yeah, we kind of. It was a bit of a long-running joke when we didn't have a team name because, we was just referred to as kind of like the Wild Northerners. But yeah, now we're where we have actually tried to mobilize the team name. We are just waiting for the guys who do run Bag of Tools to set that up.
What's the name, Carl?
For a while was just the Mersey Malibros, because we're all around Merseyside, and was predominantly male. But as we've grown, we've actually changed to the Northwest Malifaux because we've got quite a few female players and we incorporate most of the northwest of the UK. So, a slight little change. But yeah, we're planning, Jamie and the Flipping Weirds, do it really well. They've got all their merch and their t-shirts and stuff like that. And, we are planning to have something similar. And one thing I will be doing is definitely stealing the forfeit idea for whoever comes last. And because I could think of some quite shameful things to do to some of the players, for coming.
Yeah. And in the right spirit, I think that's great, and it makes it, and in its own way, makes it a little less serious, right? We can all get bent out of shape and be ultra competitive, but we're still pushing little dolls around on the table. So let's not take things, too seriously at any point in time. But
it's a bit like the we were saying about the wooden spoon. It's celebrating it rather than make it a big a shameful thing of it.
Yeah, you can have both. I think you can have a competitive community that plays to win, but also a community that fosters each other, encourages each other, acts like a decent human being, during play, and everybody still can have fun. It doesn't, a lot of times competitive play can have a bad rap. And I think it's a bad rap that's typically, in my experience, garnered by other competitive games, or games that are played competitively that really shouldn't be played competitively. I don't see that really with Malifaux, and it's part of the reason why I call myself a competitive player in Malifaux, is because I like it, and it's something, and we're going to talk about kind of the U.S. and in comparison to the U.K. But I think one thing that the U.S. and the U.K. that I get a feeling has is that we have good communities, like good groups of people, and either the asshats don't show up or the asshats weed themselves out. And there's just far fewer of them, I think, than versus going to a 40K tournament, where I think you'll see a few more of them. But what we're going to do, guys, I want to take another break. And then when we get back from this break, I'm really interested to hear kind of your perspectives on running demos for new people. So we'll focus on that in the next segment. We'll be right back. Howdy friends, Craig here. With 3rd edition Malifaux released, it's time for you to get a new mat with new deployment zones. We've tried every mat in the business, and nobody has better quality and selection than Mats by Mars. They're waterproof and they roll and unroll easily, and they're even wet erase Marco compatible. They offer over 35 designs and let you add M3EO overlays for making deployment and positioning a breeze. Check them out at matsbymars.com. They are offering a sweet discount for our listeners. After you found the perfect mat, use the promo code 3rd floor to get 10% off your entire order. If you really want to support us, in the notes of your order, request that our logo be put in the corner of your mat. It's the only way to make the best mat in the business even cooler. Again, that's Mat by Mars. Use the promo code 3rd floor to get a 10% discount. Details are in the show notes. So one of the things that, henchmen are expected to do, encouraged to do is, to get new people to play the game. And it happens a couple different ways. One way is, hey, Carl, I got a buddy and he's interested in the game. Can he meet you at the shop on Tuesday and can you show him how to play? Or another scenario is, you're at a gaming convention and you walk up to one of the 50 tables that are showing off their games and, they give you a quick demo of it. So I want to kind of get an idea of it. So Carl, let's start with you. When I tell you that I've got a good buddy of mine who's interested in Malifaux, can he meet you at the shop on Tuesday? What is your approach to that game on Tuesday? How do you do that demo?
Yeah, usually when I've run demos in the past, I take a nice variety of models, just so then we can see a bit of a broader range of the game. Because I know from myself, like I said, when I was gifted that Lilith Nephilim box, I just thought, get out. This box is not me whatsoever. And then it probably delayed me getting into the game. So, right. Yeah, the first thing I'm looking at is what are the best models that I can bring to show off the game, to show off, essentially one of Malifaux's strongest points, which is, a range of generally gorgeous figures. And then in terms of the demo game itself, I like to keep them a little bit smaller. So generally going to be about, 30 to 35 soul stones. I'll always have a specific fixed strategy. Like M2E demos were great because it'd often be extraction. So it forced each other to go to a center point and then kind of showed how it progressed over the game. And then I'd also just, again, curate the two schemes. So it'd be a scheme that showed off interacting and a scheme that shows off killing. And just to show that, because a lot of people traditionally who I've given demos to are Games Workshop guys, and up until recently, most Games Workshop games were you win by killing the most, you score the most VPs. So it is a very one-dimensional way route to victory, whereas Malifaux's not, and you obviously there's the age-old kind of analogy of someone tabling their opponent, but then still going down by a point or two. And so when I'm getting a demo, when I'm giving a demo, should I say, that's what I really want to drive into people. And not, not a concussive blow with a hammer sort of drive, but just to keep reminding them that, killing isn't always the best option. And that actually in this particular position, it might be useful to, kind of reset and just kind of keep in mind what it is. And yeah, I think demos that split the schemes up, and again, the strategy that shows both sides of it quite well, just really projects what Malifaux's about. And again, keep it simple. Don't usually put upgrades on stuff. Don't mess with soul stones too much. Some people you get a gauge that they're quite a good player, or they're quite a seasoned sort of tabletop gamer, and you might tweak it for them. But yeah, generally it's really simple, very clear on what they have to do, and very clear on kind of how we can do it without walking them through it. So they feel like they're figuring things out by themselves as well, and taking that kind of good feeling for everything that goes well. And yeah, that's generally pretty much how I approached most of my demos. And yeah, really just driving that all the plus points of what Malifaux can offer as a game.
So what do you think, Carl, what do you want their key takeaways to be? So when someone walks away from that demo, what are the top 3 things you want them to know and remember?
Firstly would be, I want them to enjoy it. I want them to feel like that play experience was really generous. As they're playing, it felt good to do what they're doing, and it wasn't just kind of running through the motions. We weren't just, move this model, flip this card, and kind of, it was a bit dull. That'd be the worst, because, there's times when I've played fantasy, and even good games. I remember a game particularly where my opponent was taking units off as opposed to models. And it just didn't last that long. And afterwards, it's like, I got the win. This opponent just got destroyed. But I thought it's quite a hollow feeling, because it can't have been enjoyable for him just to essentially move everything piecemeal off. And I don't often see that in Malifaux. It does happen. You see where some people get absolutely destroyed and annihilated, and you just think, Jesus, that's a real ass whooping. But and I've had a few of them, and given a few of them, and it is part of the game. But for someone who's playing the demo, I want them to feel like they're itching for more. So I want them to feel like that card mechanic is clicking, and they're understanding the control aspect of the game. Because for me, as I said before, that is one of my favorite things about Malifaux, because your cards can still screw you over, but not in nowhere near in the same way as dice can. So yeah, a big bit is if you can see that those cards are actually a positive mechanic, and then like I said, if the game after they've played it, they feel like they want to play more or learn more, try more. I think they're the big bits. The demo's gone well, and it's come out very positively.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that you said, Carl, that really kind of registered with me a lot, and I want to emphasize it, is that letting them play the game, don't play it for them. So it's one thing to kind of say, here's a couple models, here's a crew, and I've got my little crew, and here's the things, and you go over the basics, the nuts and bolts. but let them make decisions. Don't tell them, no, now you're going to want to do this, or no, don't do that. That's a bad idea. I like that, Carl, pointing out that, you got to let them kind of figure it out, and also taking the temperature of how experienced they are in tabletop gaming, playing to their level of knowledge, not in quality of play, but understanding of the game. And, it's very easy to overload people because there's a lot to Malifaux. So I like that approach. David, how about you? How about less of a kind of I've got a hot lead like we talked about with Carl, where, we book it on a Tuesday night. Is there a cold lead approach to demoing?
Yeah, I think so. I do. If I talk about demoing at shows, which is I've done a lot of. It's quite a different approach. You've got, instead of an evening, generally, you haven't got time to go through a full game. You haven't got 2 hours. You've probably got 20, 30 minutes to engage somebody and give somebody an impression of what the game is about, enough for them to say, yeah, that appeals to me, or it doesn't appeal to me. Right. And so, to me, the biggest thing was the starter set. And it was something I didn't really think the game needed. And I think it was the best thing that happened for the game, in terms of getting people involved. And I used to use then, I think it was scenario 3 out of the starter book, which is 3 models, so henchmen, 2 minions who are the same. So you've only got 2 cards to worry about, and just used to play effectively assassinate and you play that over a small area. I built this up a nice little, I think it was an 18-inch by 12-inch little demo board, and you'd play on that. And then for the actual table space that we'd have, probably 3 foot or 4 foot square, you'd have the other crews out. So I've got a bag which has just got almost one of each faction. So I've got a Lynch crew, and I've got a Summer crew who I never play, but are sat there, and so you can talk to people about the different factions and the different play style, and then depending how interested they are, you can then take the story wider or smaller as you wish. But generally, people come in and say, "How does this game play?" So, right, here we are. Here's 3 models. This is your leader. This is some other guys, and you've set it up so you've got about the right distance apart. So there's a bit of movement, there's a bit of shooting, there's a bit of combat, and I may have to tune it a bit for 3rd edition. We've not done any 3rd edition yet in that environment because of the timing of the release. But that is, just giving them the opportunity, as Carl said, to play it their way. You will soon experience this. The experienced players will read the cards. You can always tell. You can always tell the experienced players, because the first thing they do is pick the cards when they read both sides of the cards.
Right.
Yeah, and they're not listening to you anymore. They're reading the cards, and you'll be playing the game and trying to keep it simple. And they're going, "Yeah, but I could do this as well." And you're going, "Well, yeah, you can. Yeah, carry on." And especially if you get 2, it's always better if you get 2 people. You get a couple. I mean, getting couples to play is so much fun, because you don't need to talk about competitive element there. They've got the rivalry built in. If it's 2 mates, then it's perhaps a little bit less so, but certainly couples. Some of the most fun demos I've ever had have been couples who just want to, especially the lady wants to really be a partner. Uber competitive.
It's a funny thing, David. I never thought about it, but boy, I would much prefer, if I was running a demo, not to be one of the players. If you can get 2 new people, especially if they know each other, I think that that's real smart. So in that environment where you've only really got 30 minutes to kind of show them the game, what do you think are kind of the key takeaways? So when someone walks away and they talk to their friend that night at the game convention and say, "Hey, did you check out Malifaux? It's got this, this, and this." What are those things you want them to relate?
I think that probably the biggest thing is the card mechanic, because that's the most different thing. And getting them to understand, which they generally pick up pretty quickly, is the card mechanic. It's the movement effect that you can do other things with your models rather than just I move, I shoot. And trying to get that story across, and the fact that it's got the aesthetic. So have an interesting demo table. So I've got a little asylum building that looks like a bit like an asylum, and with the asylum models, that works really quite well. So you've got the visual aspect to it, and just giving them a bit of the story and a bit of the feel of the game, so they've got an idea of the setting, because we all know that that's an important part to us. I think so. Most Malifaux players get the setting and get the environment and want to read the fluff.
Well, it's a differentiator, right? It's not just the cards; it's the setting. And when I first came across Malifaux, I thought that the setting was gimmicky, and I thought the card mechanic was gimmicky. And very quickly, they became my two favorite things about the game. So no, I think that is smart. I think that. I'm going to go back to what you said, Carl. I really like it. And David, you touched on it, especially when you talk about getting two people that know each other, playing each other, is let them play. And don't feel they have to learn every rule. Don't feel like you want them to walk away understanding the cards, understanding the cheat mechanic as well, having a feel for the setting. And I also like the point that I think, David, you made, which was you don't just move and shoot. You just don't move and whack people. That models are doing different things. And what we're ultimately doing is saying, this is what's different. This is what makes Malifaux and why we love it so much.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And then get them a feel, because if they're interested, you can then talk about the other crews you've got about. And, you've got the Neverborn are quite different from the Gremlins, are quite different from the guild, for example, and they can get that feel, and people will engage with one of those. We all have our favourite, the crew that we started with, or the faction that we play the most of, although we'll perhaps play about with other things. I'm a guild player and will always be a guild player, but I'll play other stuff and I'll enjoy playing. I've been playing Nakima recently and I've been having the most fun. But I will go back to playing guild.
You're still a guild man.
I'm still a guild man, I'm afraid so.
That's funny. All right, guys, we're going to take one last break. And when we get back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about if there are differences between how the U.S. looks and plays the game and how the U.K. does. So we'll be right back. Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast. So I've had a lot of conversations, about, the UK, the US, and there was, discussions. I think it was 2 years ago that we had a US team come over for the team championship that was over there in the UK. But something that made me think about this is I actually had a conversation with, of all people, Alex, earlier today or late yesterday. And, we were talking about, I don't know how it came up, but I said, at some point I want to have kind of a Third Floor Wars Royal Rumble where we get, Varney and Doxy and Alex, three players. And then, we'll get, Cody Hyatt, we'll get Steve Bynum and, some other top, another top player, and you kind of a US versus UK Royal Rumble. And, Alex, without even hesitating, says, well, you guys will kill us. And I said, what? I said, you think so? And he goes, yeah, you guys, he goes, and this is his impression. He said, you guys play a far more cutthroat, ruthless game than we do over here. And that kind of prompted me to see what do you guys agree with Alex? Do you think that, that the US has a different way to play it? How about you, David? Do you understand where Alex was coming from when he said that?
Yeah, I understand that. I ran the last ITC and attended the previous one as a judge and general helper, and the attitude of those players was more competitive. And I think there's 2 elements to it. I think maybe there is that more competitive element, but also if you spent a large amount of money to travel over, you're going to be doing it for your competitive. apart from and my exception would be the Spanish guys who attended the ITC, who obviously travelled over from Spain, and they'd done it just for the crack, and they had the most fun. And I really appreciated that. And we've got some of them are over for the UK Nationals in November. And I know they'll be fun. So some guys are coming over to be super competitive because they're competitive players, and some guys are coming over just because they enjoy the atmosphere and just playing some games and playing some different people. So certainly from my experience of ITC, the Polish teams and the American teams were more competitive than the Brits and some of the other teams that were there who travelled. If you put together the top British team, then maybe they'd be more competitive. And I have to say, the Flipping Weirds have wimped out of these events so far, and I'm not quite sure why. And that's an interesting point that I shall leave open because I'm not going to judge that.
So we use the term, that they're more competitive, David. When you say that, what exactly does that mean?
I think it just seems that the attitude that I've seen. I don't think that necessarily they're necessarily a better player on the table,
right?
But there's certainly the feeling you got as the organizer, as observer in the 2 years was that element of we really want to win and we will, because the way the ITC works and you're pairing off against people is very much more, trying some aggressive tactics with the crews. And I think certainly in general tournament play in the UK, you get it occasionally, but generally you're perhaps stepping it back a level in the majority of your games, and then maybe you'll step it up for play one of the other top level
table
players.
Yeah.
And the other place you potentially see it is in the Masters. So we have a Masters event in the UK, which is the top 16 ranked players in the UK. So they get an invite to an event, which is a 2-day event. We run it as pools on the first day. So 4 pools of 4. So everybody plays everybody in that pool, and then the top 2 from each pool will then go into a pure knockout second day. And so the first day tends to be perhaps a little more relaxed. The second day can get very, very intense, and it's quite a difficult event to run over in the last few years. And the Masters side of it, and some of those games can get pretty tense. It depends who the players are, but yeah, that's quite interesting event to run.
Yeah, I bet. Well, having it be a knockout on the second day, I would imagine. I mean, you lose, you're done. So that's got to be intense. How about you, Carl? Is what David and Alex talking about make sense?
So yeah, me and Alex talk quite a lot because obviously we're pretty close to each other, and we are pretty good friends. And this is we kind of discussed the mentality side of, I think, the UK and US metas, and I think it often comes across that the US players are potentially more cutthroat, or more calculated in kind of the decisions we make. I've listened to a fair amount of podcasts, and obviously Travis's podcast when he used to do it was Max Value, and kind of that always struck me as a very American ideal in the sense that it's getting the absolute maximum for the minimum. It's kind of like like an 80-20 sort of ideology, and it interested me anyway. And it's something I look into outside of Malifaux. But I think that a lot of the top states players go in it with a very methodical approach. And I'm not saying that us in the UK don't, but I think particularly from conversations that me and Alex have, is sometimes it can come across that the guys and girls in the States are a lot of things are black and white. It's I don't know, X model's going to do this, and I've got the cards to make sure this will happen irrespectively. And, that's just a logical way of playing it.
Right.
But I think, particularly the way me and Alex talk about playing is, we often have kind of the gray areas. Like, we might risk it more, if we don't have it, and just on the off chance that, your opponent doesn't have, a high enough card. So, you still, there's a risk element, or, it could backfire. And, it might be that actually when it comes down to the game, some players will just do it. I think Cody mentioned it, in the Nova round table, that he just had the feeling that his deck was going to be hitting those high cards, and he just kind of, flipped and hoped. And sometimes you get that feeling. And, but I think part of the reason why us Brits potentially have a perception that, the American players are more competitive is certain players come across a bit more rigid and mechanical in that viewpoint. And, I didn't play the ITC where Travis came over. But I know, Travis and Larry, and the other guys, but I do speak to, because we had an Austrian on their team, Tristan, and I talk to Tristan every now and again.
Great guy.
Yeah, lovely guy. A friend of mine lived in Austria, so I've been out a few times and popped in Tristan's shop last time I was there, or the shop he works at. And we was talking, obviously, Malifaux, because, it's a universal language to Malifaux players. And, he had adopted kind of the similar viewpoint. And so it was interesting kind of talking firsthand, because obviously I've not met Travis or Larry or any of the other guys. I've not been to the States or had those conversations. So yeah, that was as close to kind of having that conversation and the kind of mental approach to how they played foe. And obviously, as of the last ITC, and there was an American team, but we didn't play them, mainly because we had a dropout and loitered around the low tables because we were always losing around. But our first game was against the Polish team that won. And I think people being competitive can have positive and negative connotations. So some people be like, oh, they're a super competitive team. And it might be that actually they're not a very social team.
Right.
So like the Polish players were all very good players. And, it was an enjoyable game from a strategic point of view. However, from the social aspect, it wasn't necessarily the most interactive or sociable game. And that's because, like I think Dave hit the nail on the head perfectly. When people travel a long distance to come and play an event, then they are looking to do as well as possible. And for some people, that means that they're kind of in the zone, they're focused, and they're not going to let their guard slip, or they're not going to get caught off by sort of being extra sociable. That could be after the day's games, when you have a drink or something to eat. But it might just be that they are in the zone and they're focusing solely on Malifaux. And I think we probably come across a little bit more casual, particularly at the team tournaments, because we've not put together a team of the very best players, because we're playing in our local groups. And you might have the York guys, and a couple of them might be a bit lower down the curve, say, or the same with our group. We went and we had one person who was really on fire and won most of his games, and then with the rest of us, we weren't quite firing on all cylinders like they were. So some people dragged the team down, but we kind of were representative of our area, and it's easier to do that just because the UK is smaller, you know, where
right.
teams generally aren't traveling as far to represent at the ITC, whereas, you know, the guys from the States are flying probably 6,500 miles. You know, the guys from Poland are flying, you know, hundreds, maybe 1,000 miles, you know,
Yep.
and they're invested in it. And, whereas, yeah, we're there, we're still going to try and win our games. But also you're seeing people you might not have seen for a while.
Yep.
And yeah, just a big social side of it.
Well, and the import teams are a little bit of a dream team, which I think you're alluding to, Carl, mm-hmm. because, you know, we're not sending 5 teams from the U.S. We sent 1 team, and, you know, the same from the Polish group. So it's going to be a little bit more of the best, whereas the talent probably in the UK was spread around a little bit.
I think in fairness to the American guys that came off, there wasn't a best of the best team. It was just the guys that were available to come over. They happened to be all good players. So I think there was some argument about that, or some discussion about that. In the past, that it wasn't a best of the best team from America. It was the 5 guys who happened to know each other and travelled out together. That's
definitely.
So I think if you brought the best of the best team over, we'd really be in trouble.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, so a couple thoughts I had, you know, listening to both of you, and I thought both of your perspectives were fascinating. You know, to a certain degree, because there's a reasonably sized ocean between you and us, our perceptions are skewed based off of what's available for information. You know, so, you know, the Max Value podcast, rest in peace, was my favorite podcast. And, you know, Travis's podcast was devoted to, you know, analytical, you know, competitive play. And that builds a perception. I mean, you look just within the U.S., there's a perception that the East Coast is far more competitive than the rest of the country. And, you know, based on the information available, maybe, you know, I'm not quite sure. The one thing I need to make very clear, though, is that in no way does Larry represent the U.S. In any shape, form, or anything. So he is a unique animal, and he is Larry. He's a buddy of mine, and I like Larry, but does not represent necessarily what the U.S. competitive player is. But it's interesting, and I've really enjoyed trying to get you know, different groups on the show. Coming up, we're going to have an episode devoted to the Russian nationals. So I spent an hour or 2 with the podium from Russia and their event, and it was very interesting to hear them talk about Malifaux. I also need to get some of the Aussies on the show because I think it's good for all of us to hear you know, how different people approach the game and how they look at the game. You know, and one thing that you guys both alluded to too is from a geography standpoint, obviously the US and the UK are very different. It's probably better to compare maybe the East Coast to the UK than it is to compare the States to the UK. But David, during the break, you and I were kind of chatting, and I thought there was something really neat that you guys have kind of developed there. Can you talk a little bit about the group calendar?
Yeah, so we had a situation of 2011, 2012, where there were events happening the same weekend, and they were distracting from each other. You know, you've only got a limited number of players. And so we set up a calendar, which the original intention was all the henchmen would have access to it. But in the end, it's been me who basically picks up events that appear on Facebook or on the forum and just put them in a shared format. And so therefore you can see, from 2 points of view. One is I'm a TO and I want to run an event in 3 months' time. It could be this weekend or that weekend. You can look on the calendar and see if there's other events on that weekend. And if one's in the south of England and you're in the north of England, not a problem. If it's in the similar sort of area, then maybe you avoid that weekend and have it, you know, a different weekend. But also as a player, you want to pick out the tournaments that you want to go to, or when you're free. Hey, I'm free next weekend. Where can I travel? Okay, there's an event that's 2 hours away. I'm willing to go to that. I'll go to that event. So it was there to promote events to the community. So you've got one place to go that's very easy to see. Everybody understands the calendar. Yep. Sometimes on the forum or on Facebook, it's a bit more difficult to find the events, but it's proved very successful. It's very easy to maintain, and it's the regular players, the regular tournament players especially, know they can go there and find out what events are on and where they want to manage their weekends or plan their months ahead and negotiate with their other halves who may or may not release them for the weekend. And to be honest, the English GT was moved a week to avoid my son's wedding. So
nice.
These things have to happen.
Look how important you are, David. Isn't that impressive?
I don't think it was me that was important. I think it was the piles of boxes of terrain that were in my garage that were important. But
you have leverage.
I do have a bit of leverage. Yeah.
That's funny. One of the things that Ray and I are talking about is having something like that for the U.S. Built around the USFO tour on Third Floor Wars. So right now, we do have events listed that are turned into us. Upcoming events are available by conference. But one of the things that I've started talking to Ray about, and maybe by the time this is released, it'll already be there, is really that master calendar that is easy to navigate, especially for somebody who says, I got a business trip in Boston. Is there anything, close to the hotel or something like that? So I do like that idea. Gentlemen, this was great. I appreciate both of you making the time, especially we're recording this on a weekend. So for you guys to set aside time on the weekend is appreciated. And I look forward to definitely having both of you back on. And David, I definitely want to talk to you after the next big event. And especially I want to learn what it's like to run an event with 80 some odd people playing. So we'll definitely bring you back when that happens. And of course, the year following, when you crush the 120 record, which is going to happen, we'll have to have you back on. And Carl, I'll see you in the Reser chat.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. No doubt defending Seamus and Red Chapel while everyone tears into bits.
Well, I can tell you, and you guys haven't heard it yet because it hasn't been released while we're recording this, but people listening to this now will have heard it. The Steve Bynum Seamus deep dive, I think, is going to bring a lot more people over to your camp, Carl, that Seamus and Red Chapel have play. Because, boy, a lot of people are talking bad stuff about Red Chapel, but it's hard not to listen to that deep dive from Steve and not go, well, I think that there is play. And you've been making that argument for a long time.
Yeah, sometimes it felt like I was the only guy making that argument. But no, I look forward to the episode from Stephen about it because usually he's got quite a perspective that I actually enjoy and probably share. So it'll be interesting to see what he's done, what horrible things he's plucked out of the Red Chapel. The reason I like, Stephen's a common guest for us. And part of the reason is not only is Stephen just a good dude, but to your point, Carl, I find Stephen to have a very unique perspective on the game. And it turns out that I think it's also an effective perspective as far as, winning games. But more than that, I like how he looks at the game, and I think it's a little bit different. And hopefully the listeners have enjoyed it because it makes you. There's sometimes that he'll say something or he'll approach something that'll make you go, you know what? I never thought about it that way, which is really one of my goals here on the podcast. So, gentlemen, thanks again. David, take care of yourself. Carl, take care of yourself, and we'll catch you next time. Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg.
All right, cheers. Be sure to check out our shop on thirdfloorwars.com for the latest gaming apparel and gear. While you're there, check out how the USFO Tour is shaping up. How does your conference compare to the others in the United States? Where do you rank nationally? Get those models built, painted, and on the table so we can see you at the US Masters Invitational in October of 2020. Also, rate and write a review on this podcast for us. It really helps us find people almost as cool as you are. Thanks for listening. Howdy, friend. Craig here. Is this episode making you realize you need to buy some models? Gadzooks Gaming is my favorite online retailer because of their large selection, killer prices, and great customer service. Don't you hate buying an entire crew box when you only need one model? Gadzooks sells crew box models individually and saves you a ton of money. They even have free shipping to the US and Canada if you spend $100 or more. Swing by gadzooksgaming.com and make sure you tell them Craig from the Third Floor sent you. All the details are in the show notes.